I still remember the sound of her hand hitting my face like it happened yesterday. The sharp sting, the ringing in my ears, the disbelief that froze me in place. My wife, Emily, had always been kind, gentle even. But the woman standing in front of me wasn't Emily anymore. Her eyes burned with fury, her lips curled into a snarl I didn't recognize. "You bastard," she spat, raising her hand again. This time, I flinched, but the second slap never came. Instead, her brothers stepped forward, their fists clenched, their faces twisted with rage. "Explain yourself," growled Ryan, the oldest of the three. His voice was low, dangerous, like a storm about to break. Behind him, Jake cracked his knuckles while Matt loomed silently, ready to pounce. What could I say? How do you defend yourself against something so absurd, so impossible? That morning, Emily's younger sister, Claire, had shown up at our house unannounced, tears streaming down her face. She claimed I'd gotten her pregnant after a drunken night at some work party months earlier. And just like that, my life imploded. Claire's words were poison, seeping into every corner of my marriage and destroying everything I held dear. Emily believed her without question. Why wouldn't she? Claire was family, the golden child, the one everyone trusted. Meanwhile, I was just the guy who married into their perfect little world. Deep down, they probably thought I wasn't good enough for Emily anyway. When the truth finally came out, months later, it was too late. By then, I'd already lost everything, my home, my job, my dignity. The police report proved Claire's lie. She'd fabricated the whole thing because she couldn't handle being dumped by her boyfriend and wanted someone to blame. But no amount of evidence could undo the damage. Emily refused to see me, blocked my calls, and filed for divorce. Her family treated me like a ghost, pretending I never existed. So I left. Packed a bag, booked a one-way ticket to anywhere but here, and disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. I ended up in Portland, Oregon, where nobody knew me or cared about my past. I started over, working odd jobs, keeping to myself, trying to forget the life I once had. Years passed. Slowly, the pain dulled, though it never fully went away. I built a new routine, made a few friends, even dated casually. Life wasn't great, but it was stable. Quiet. Safe. Or so I thought. Then, one rainy evening, there was a knock on my door. At first, I ignored it. Maybe it was a neighbor or a delivery guy. But the knocking persisted, louder this time, more insistent. Grumbling, I opened the door, and froze. It was Emily. She looked different. Older, thinner, her hair shorter and streaked with gray. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands trembled as she clutched the strap of her purse. For a moment, we just stared at each other, neither of us speaking. Finally, she broke the silence. "Mark," her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "Can I come in?" Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face. To tell her she had no right showing up here after everything that happened. But another part, a stupid, stubborn part, wanted answers. So I stepped aside and let her in. She hesitated before walking past me, glancing around the small apartment as if searching for clues about the man I'd become. When she finally turned to face me, her eyes were filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. Sorry. After all these years, she shows up out of nowhere and says sorry." I felt a surge of anger, hot and bitter, bubbling up inside me. "You're sorry?" I snapped. "That's it. You ruined my life, believe your psychotic sister over me, and now you think sorry fixes everything." "It doesn't," she admitted, lowering her head. "Nothing will ever make up for what I did. But I need your help." Her words caught me off guard. Help? What could she possibly need from me now? As if reading my thoughts, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Handing it to me, she whispered, "Read it." It was a letter, from Claire. In it, she confessed not only to lying about me but also to embezzling money from her company. Now she was in trouble, deep debt, and facing prison time unless someone bailed her out. Emily's family had spent every penny trying to protect her, but it wasn't enough. Desperate, they'd turned to Emily, who had nowhere else to go but me. I stared at the letter, my mind reeling. Of course it would come to this. Claire screws up, and somehow, I'm still expected to clean up the mess. Only this time, Emily wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was begging, for herself, for her family, for the sister she loved despite everything. "I know I don't deserve anything from you," she said softly. "But please, if there's any part of you that still cares about me, about us." Her voice trailed off, choked with emotion. For a long moment, I didn't respond. I just stood there, torn between resentment and pity. Could I really walk away? Should I? In the end, I made my decision, not because of Emily or Claire or anyone else, but because of me. Because holding on to hate was exhausting, and maybe letting go was the only way to truly move on. Fine, I said finally, folding the letter and slipping it into my pocket. But this doesn't change anything. You understand that, right? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. As she left my apartment, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. Whether I'd done the right thing or not, I couldn't say. But for the first time in years, I felt lighter. Like maybe, just maybe, I was finally free. The days after Emily's visit were strange. I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me had shifted, like a crack in the foundation letting light seep through for the first time in years. But it wasn't relief, not exactly. It was more complicated than that. Helping her family felt like closing a chapter one never wanted to open again, yet somehow, it also gave me closure. I wired the money anonymously, using a friend's account to avoid any direct connection. I didn't want Claire or anyone else knowing where it came from. To them, it would be a mysterious benefactor stepping in at the last minute. That was fine by me. I wasn't doing this for recognition or gratitude. I did it because, well, maybe deep down, I still cared about Emily. Or maybe I just needed to prove to myself that I could rise above the bitterness that had consumed me for so long. But life doesn't let you move on that easily. A week later, there was another knock on my door. This time, I knew who it would be before I even opened it. Emily stood there again, drenched from the rain, clutching an umbrella she hadn't bothered to use. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. She looked like someone carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, and maybe she was. I know it was you, she said without preamble. Her voice was steady, though her eyes betrayed the turmoil beneath. You sent the money. I hesitated, then nodded. There was no point denying it. What do you want me to say, Emily? You came here begging for help, and I gave it. End of story. She stepped closer, her gaze piercing. Why? That one word hit me harder than anything she'd said before. Why? Because I'm a sucker who can't stay mad forever. Because I still loved her, even after everything. Because I wanted to believe people could change. Instead of answering, I turned away and walked into the apartment, leaving the door ajar. After a moment, she followed, closing it behind her. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. The rain tapped against the window, filling the room with its rhythmic patter. Finally, she spoke. I don't expect you to forgive me, she began, her voice trembling. I don't even deserve it. But I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just for believing Claire but for everything, for not trusting you, for letting my family destroy you. I failed you, Mark. In every way possible. Her words hung in the air, heavy and raw. I wanted to lash out, to tell her she was right, that she'd ruined my life and nothing could fix it. But the anger I'd carried for so long felt, distant now, like a fire that had burned itself out. Do you remember our wedding day? I asked suddenly, surprising even myself. She blinked, caught off guard. Of course I do. It was the happiest day of my life. I chuckled bitterly. Funny, because mine ended up being one of the worst. She flinched, guilt flashing across her face. Mark. No, listen, I interrupted, holding up a hand. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm just trying to explain how far we've fallen. Back then, I thought we were invincible. I thought nothing could come between us. And look at us now, strangers sitting in a tiny apartment, trying to make sense of the wreckage. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. I hate what I did to us, she whispered. Every single day, I hate it. But I don't know how to fix it. You can't, I said simply. Some things are too broken to mend. She nodded, accepting my words without argument. For once, she didn't try to justify herself or beg for redemption. Maybe she finally understood that some wounds run too deep to heal completely. For the next hour, we talked, or rather, she talked while I listened. She told me about the guilt that haunted her, the sleepless nights spent wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. She admitted that losing me had shattered her in ways she couldn't put into words. And she confessed that she'd spent years searching for me, hoping against hope that she'd find me someday. When she finished, the rain had stopped, and the sky outside was streaked with orange and pink. The storm had passed, both literally and figuratively. I should go, she said quietly, standing up. Thank you for seeing me. For helping me. For everything. I nodded, unsure of what else to say. As she reached for the doorknob, I called out her name. Emily. She turned, her eyes wide with uncertainty. I hope you find peace, I said. Whatever that looks like for you. Her lips parted as if she wanted to respond, but instead, she just smiled, a small, sad smile, and left. Weeks turned into months, and I didn't hear from Emily again. Part of me wondered if she'd moved on, started over like I had. Another part hoped she'd found happiness, even if it wasn't with me. Letting her go wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Holding onto the past only kept me trapped in it. Life in Portland continued as usual. I went to work, hung out with friends, took long walks along the river when I needed to clear my head. But something felt different now, a subtle shift, like the air after a thunderstorm. Lighter. Fresher. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I realized I was smiling for the first time in years. Not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because I'd survived. I'd faced betrayal, loss, and heartbreak, and somehow, I'd come out the other side. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. It had been nearly 6 months since Emily's last visit, and life in Portland had settled into its usual rhythm. I told myself I was fine, better than fine, even. The anger that once consumed me had faded into something quieter, less volatile. It wasn't happiness, exactly, but it was close enough. Or so I thought. Then, one crisp autumn morning, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name scrawled across the front in handwriting I recognized instantly. My stomach tightened as I opened it, half expecting another plea for help or apology from Emily. Instead, I found a single sheet of paper with a short note. Asterisk, Mark. I know you've moved on, and I don't blame you. But there are things you deserve to know, things I should have told you a long time ago. Please meet me at the park near your apartment tomorrow at noon. If you don't show up, I'll understand. Emily, asterisk. I read the note 3 times, each word sinking deeper into my chest like a stone dropped into still water. What could she possibly want now? More explanations. Another chance. The idea felt absurd, and yet, a small part of me couldn't ignore the curiosity gnawing at the edges of my mind. The next day, I stood under the canopy of golden leaves in the park, hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets. Noon came and went, and I started to think she wasn't going to show. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her approaching, a figure wrapped in a gray scarf, her steps hesitant, almost timid. She stopped a few feet away, studying me like she wasn't sure what to say. Finally, she spoke. Thank you for coming. I didn't say I'd come, I replied evenly. You said yourself you'd understand if I didn't. She nodded, looking down at her shoes. Yeah, I did. But I hoped. Hoped what? I pressed, my voice sharper than I intended. That I'd drop everything because you asked nicely. That I'd forget everything that happened and pretend we're okay. No, she said quickly, shaking her head. No, Mark, that's not why I'm here. I'm not asking for forgiveness or a second chance. I just need to tell you the truth. Her words caught me off guard. Truth? After all this time, after everything she'd already confessed, what else could there be? What truth? I asked cautiously. She took a deep breath, then sat down on a nearby bench, gesturing for me to join her. Reluctantly, I did. When Claire lied about you, she began, her voice trembling slightly, it wasn't just about getting back at her boyfriend or covering up her mistakes. There was more to it. She hated you. I frowned, confused. Hated me? Why? Emily hesitated, twisting the edge of her scarf between her fingers. Because she thought I loved you more than I loved her. Growing up, Claire always felt like she had to compete for my attention, with Mom, with Dad, with everyone. When I married you, it was like she lost me completely. She resented you for taking me away from her. Her confession hit me like a punch to the gut. All this time, I'd assumed Claire's lie was random, malicious, but personal. Targeted. The idea made my skin crawl. She wanted to hurt me, Emily continued, tears welling in her eyes. And she succeeded. But when she saw how much damage she caused, not just to you, but to our family, she panicked. She tried to take it back, but by then, it was too late. Everyone believed her. Even me. So why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice low. What does it change? Nothing, she admitted softly. It doesn't fix anything. But you deserve to know why it happened. You deserve to understand that none of this was your fault. Her words hung in the air, heavy and raw. For years, I'd carried the weight of her betrayal, convinced I must have done something wrong. Hearing her say it wasn't my fault felt liberating. And infuriating. Because no matter how freeing the truth was, it couldn't erase the pain. We sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the park swirling around us, children laughing, leaves rustling, dogs barking in the distance. Eventually, Emily spoke again. I'm leaving town, she said quietly. I've accepted a job offer in Chicago. It's a fresh start, for me, for my family. I can't keep living in the shadow of what happened. I need to move forward. Good for you, I muttered, though the words tasted bitter in my mouth. Wasn't that what I'd been doing all along? Moving forward. Letting go. She glanced at me, her expression pained. I know I don't have the right to ask this, but do you think we could ever be friends again? Someday. Friends. The word felt hollow, inadequate. How could we go from lovers to enemies to friends? It seemed impossible. Yet, as I looked at her, really looked at her, I saw someone who was broken, just like me. Someone who had spent years carrying the same guilt and regret that I had. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday. But not today. She nodded, accepting my answer without argument. Standing up, she gave me a small, sad smile. Take care of yourself, Mark. You too, I replied, watching as she walked away, her scarf fluttering behind her like a ghost. Weeks turned into months, and Emily's absence became permanent. Occasionally, I wondered how she was doing in Chicago, whether she'd found the peace she was searching for. But mostly, I focused on my own life, on building a future unburdened by the past. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. Hey, stranger. Hope you're doing well. Just wanted to let you know I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. Thanks for listening that day in the park. E. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed a simple reply. Glad to hear it. Take care. As I set my phone down, I realized something important. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about releasing the hold the past has on you. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to let go. Months passed after Emily's text, and life returned to its quiet rhythm. I told myself her message was the final chapter in our story, a polite acknowledgement that we'd both moved on, a mutual understanding that whatever had once connected us was now firmly in the past. But deep down, I knew better. Some connections can't be severed entirely, no matter how hard you try. It started subtly, a random thought here, a fleeting memory there. At first, it was harmless enough. Seeing a couple walking hand in hand downtown made me wonder if Emily ever found someone new. Hearing a song we used to love together brought back flashes of happier times. These moments weren't painful, they were just, present, lingering like the faint scent of perfume long after the wearer has left the room. Then one day, something changed. I was at work when my phone buzzed with another text from Emily. This time, it wasn't casual or brief, it was an invitation. Hey Mark, I know it's been a while, but I wanted to ask if you'd be open to meeting up again. No strings attached, I promise. Just coffee. Or lunch. Whatever feels comfortable for you. My thumb hovered over the screen as I debated how to respond. On one hand, I owed her nothing, she'd burned that bridge years ago. On the other hand, curiosity gnawed at me. What did she want now? And why did part of me actually consider saying yes? After a few minutes of internal debate, I typed out a reply. Sure. Let's meet for coffee. Her response came almost instantly. Thank you. Meet me at Joe's Diner on Saturday at 11. Joe's Diner, a place we used to frequent during those early days of our marriage. The nostalgia hit me harder than I expected. Was this intentional? A way to remind me of what we once had? Or simply a coincidence? Saturday arrived sooner than I anticipated. As I walked into the diner, I spotted her immediately. She sat by the window, sipping a cup of coffee, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. For a moment, I felt like I'd stepped back in time, to a version of us that existed before Claire, before betrayal, before everything fell apart. She looked up as I approached, offering a tentative smile. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I said, sliding into the booth across from her. So, what's this about? She hesitated, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. I guess I just needed to see you. To talk. About what? I asked, leaning back against the seat. You already apologized. You told me the truth. What else is there to say? She sighed, setting her spoon down. I don't know. Maybe nothing. Or maybe, everything. Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she continued. I've spent so much time trying to make sense of everything that happened, she said softly. Trying to figure out where it all went wrong. And the more I think about it, the more I realize, it wasn't just Claire's fault. It wasn't even mine. It was ours. Ours. I echoed, frowning. What do you mean? I mean, she paused, searching for the right words. We stopped talking to each other. Really talking. About our fears, our doubts, our insecurities. We let little things build up until they became big things. Until we didn't trust each other anymore. Her confession caught me off guard. In all the years since the breakup, I'd never considered that we might share responsibility for the collapse of our marriage. Sure, I blamed her, and Claire, and everyone else involved. But me. Was I really complicit in the unraveling? I don't know if we could have fixed it, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I wish we'd tried harder. I wish we'd fought for us instead of letting go so easily. Her honesty disarmed me. For the first time, I saw her not as the woman who betrayed me, but as someone who was just as lost and broken as I was. Someone who still carried the weight of what we'd lost. We talked for hours that day, covering topics we'd avoided for years. She told me about her struggles in Chicago, the loneliness, the guilt, the fear of never finding happiness again. I shared my own journey, how hard it had been to rebuild my life, to trust people again, to stop blaming myself for something I couldn't control. By the time we left the diner, the sun was setting, casting the city in shades of orange and pink. Standing outside, we faced each other awkwardly, unsure of what came next. So, she began, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Does this mean we're friends now? I chuckled, shaking my head. Friends seems like a stretch. But maybe, allies. People who understand each other in ways most people don't. She smiled, a genuine, warm smile this time. I can live with that. In the months that followed, Emily and I kept in touch, not constantly, but enough to maintain a fragile thread of connection. Texts turned into occasional calls, which eventually led to sporadic visits whenever she came back to Portland for work or family. We weren't the same people we'd been before. Too much had happened, too many scars had formed. But somehow, we found a new kind of relationship, one built on honesty, vulnerability, and mutual respect. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the stars, I realized something important: forgiveness isn't linear. It doesn't happen all at once, in one grand gesture or moment of clarity. It's messy and complicated, full of setbacks and second chances. And sometimes, it looks less like closure and more like acceptance, an acknowledgement that people are flawed, relationships are fragile, and life is unpredictable. As I stared up at the night sky, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't dared to feel in years: hope. Not for reconciliation or redemption, but for the possibility that even the deepest wounds can heal, if not completely, then at least enough to let the light shine through. Months turned into a year, and Emily and I settled into an unspoken routine. We weren't lovers, not anymore, but we also weren't strangers. Our connection was something in between, fragile yet resilient, distant but meaningful. It wasn't what either of us had envisioned for our lives, but it worked, for now. Still, there were moments when the past crept back in, like shadows stretching across the ground at dusk. Sometimes it happened when I least expected it: a song on the radio, a familiar scent, or even the way Emily laughed during one of our phone calls. Those echoes of us reminded me of how much we'd lost, and how far we'd come since then. One chilly spring afternoon, as I walked home from work, my phone buzzed with a call from Emily. She rarely called these days; most of our communication happened through texts or emails. Something about hearing her voice always felt heavier, more intimate, than reading words on a screen. "Hey," she said when I answered, her tone hesitant. "Are you busy?" "Not really," I replied, slowing my pace. "What's up?" "I need to ask you something," she began, pausing as if gathering her thoughts. "My mom, she's sick. Really sick. The doctors aren't sure how much time she has left." I stopped walking altogether, the weight of her words sinking in. "Emily, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" "No," she said quickly, though her voice wavered. "That's not why I'm calling. I mean, yes, I appreciate it, but that's not what this is about." "Okay," I said cautiously. "Then what is it?" She exhaled sharply, as if bracing herself. "I want you to come with me, to see her. Before it's too late." Her request hit me like a punch to the gut. Meet her family again. After everything that had happened. The idea felt impossible, overwhelming. Yet, as I stood there in stunned silence, I realized how much courage it must have taken for her to ask. "Why me?" I finally managed to say. "After all this time, after everything they did." "Because she misses you," Emily admitted softly. "And because I think it would mean a lot to her. To both of us." The drive to her hometown was long and quiet, filled with memories I'd tried to bury. As the miles passed, I couldn't help but feel like I was stepping back into a chapter of my life I'd closed years ago. But this time, I wasn't alone. Emily sat beside me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. When we arrived, the house looked exactly the same: white siding, red shutters, flower boxes lining the windows. For a moment, I hesitated outside, unsure if I belonged here anymore. Then the front door opened, and Emily's mother appeared, leaning heavily on a cane. "Mark," she said, her voice weak but warm. "You came." "Yes, Mrs. Carter," I replied, forcing a smile. "How are you feeling?" As well as can be expected, she said with a faint chuckle. Come inside. We have a lot to catch up on. Sitting in their living room, surrounded by familiar faces I hadn't seen in years, felt surreal. Emily's brothers avoided eye contact, guilt etched onto their expressions. Claire sat in the corner, her head bowed, refusing to look at me. And Emily, she hovered near me, silently supportive, like a buffer against the storm of emotions swirling around us. Mrs. Carter wasted no time getting to the point. Mark, I owe you an apology, she said, her voice trembling. For believing Claire over you. For letting my family tear yours apart. I failed you, and I'll regret that until my dying day. Her words took me aback. Of all the people in this room, I never expected her to apologize first. Thank you, I said simply, unsure of what else to say. It means a lot. We talked for hours that evening, dredging up old wounds and laying them bare. Each confession, each apology, felt like peeling away layers of scar tissue, painful, yes, but necessary for healing. By the time we left, I realized something important. Forgiveness isn't just about letting go of anger. It's about creating space for understanding, for reconciliation, even if it's imperfect. In the weeks that followed, Emily and I grew closer, not in a romantic sense, but in a way that felt equally profound. Helping her navigate her mother's illness brought us together in ways neither of us anticipated. We leaned on each other, sharing the burden of grief and loss, finding solace in the fact that we weren't alone. Eventually, Mrs. Carter passed away peacefully, surrounded by her family, including me. At the funeral, as I stood beside Emily, holding her hand, I realized how far we'd come. From betrayal to forgiveness, from estrangement to alliance, we'd rebuilt something precious out of the ashes of our past. Life didn't magically become easier after that. There were still challenges, still moments of doubt and pain. But somehow, knowing that we'd faced the worst and survived gave me hope for the future. As I drove home from the funeral, Emily's voice echoed in my mind, people are flawed, relationships are fragile, and life is unpredictable. She was right. But maybe that's what makes the connections we fight for, the ones that endure despite everything, so incredibly beautiful. Just when I thought life had settled into its new rhythm, a fragile but steady balance between my past and present, an unexpected turn of events shattered the delicate peace I'd worked so hard to build. It started with a phone call from Emily. Her voice was strained, almost panicked, which immediately set off alarm bells in my mind. Mark, I need you to meet me, she said without preamble. Right now. Where are you? I asked, already grabbing my keys. At the hospital, she replied. It's Claire. My stomach dropped. Claire? After everything that had happened, I hadn't expected her name to ever cross my path again, at least not like this. I'll be there as soon as I can, I said, ending the call. When I arrived at the hospital, Emily was pacing outside the emergency room, her face pale and drawn. She looked up as I approached, relief washing over her features. What happened? I asked, glancing toward the double doors behind her. She overdosed, Emily said bluntly, her voice trembling. They found her unconscious in her apartment. She's in critical condition. I stared at her, stunned. Whatever I'd been expecting, it wasn't this. Claire had always been reckless, manipulative, but suicidal. The thought didn't align with the image of her I'd carried in my mind all these years. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. What do you want me to do? Emily hesitated, then reached out to touch my arm. Because she asked for you. What? I recoiled, shaking my head. That doesn't make any sense. Why would she? She left a note, Emily interrupted, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. Here. Read it. Reluctantly, I took the note and unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible, but the words hit me like a freight train. Mark. If you're reading this, it means I've done something stupid. Something irreversible. And maybe that's what I deserve after everything I put you through. But before it's too late, I need you to know the truth, the whole truth. What I did to you, it wasn't just about jealousy or revenge. It was about fear. Fear that no one would ever love me the way they loved you. Fear that I'd never be enough. I'm sorry. For everything. I read the note twice, my hands trembling. This wasn't the Claire I remembered, the entitled, vindictive woman who had destroyed my life without a second thought. This was someone broken, desperate, and deeply ashamed. She didn't mean for anyone else to see this, Emily said softly. But when the paramedics found it, they gave it to me. I don't know why she wrote it, or why she wanted you to know, but she did. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of her confession pressing down on us both. Finally, I spoke. Is she going to make it? I asked, my voice hoarse. They don't know yet, Emily admitted. Her vitals are stable, but it's touch and go. I nodded, staring at the note in my hand. 1,000 emotions swirled inside me, anger, pity, confusion, but one question rose above the rest: what was I supposed to do now? An hour later, I found myself sitting by Claire's bedside, watching her chest rise and fall with the help of a ventilator. She looked small, vulnerable, nothing like the force of chaos I'd known her to be. Part of me wanted to walk away, to leave her here and let fate decide her future, but another part couldn't ignore the ache in my chest. Not guilt, exactly, but responsibility. If I walked away now, would I be any better than she was when she lied about me? Eventually, she stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. When she saw me, her eyes widened in shock. "You," she croaked, her voice barely audible. "Why are you here?" "Your sister brought me," I said simply. "She thought you might want to talk." Claire winced, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "No, you don't," I agreed, my tone firm but not unkind. "But I'm here anyway. So talk." For the next 20 minutes, she poured out her soul, her fears, her regrets, the emptiness she'd felt for years. She admitted that lying about me had been an impulsive act born of desperation, a cry for attention she hadn't known how to express otherwise. She confessed that she'd hated herself ever since, that every day had been a battle against the guilt and shame she couldn't escape. By the time she finished, we were both crying, her silently, me struggling to hold back tears I hadn't anticipated shedding. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she whispered. "But thank you for listening." I nodded, standing up. "You need to get better, Claire. Not for me, not for your family, but for yourself." As I left the room, I realized something surprising: talking to her hadn't made me angrier. Instead, it had softened something inside me, a knot of bitterness I hadn't realized was still there. Forgiveness isn't about excusing someone's actions, it's about releasing their hold on you. And for the first time, I felt like I might actually be free. Weeks later, Claire was released from the hospital, vowing to seek therapy and rebuild her life. Emily and I continued our tentative friendship, stronger now because of the shared experience of facing her family's demons together. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I received a text from Emily. "Thank you for being there, for all of us. You've shown me that people can change, even when it feels impossible. I hope you find the same grace for yourself someday." Her words lingered in my mind long after I set my phone down. Grace, for others, and for myself. That's what this journey had been about all along: learning to forgive, to heal, to move forward despite the scars. Life is unpredictable, messy, and often painful. But it's also beautiful in ways we don't always see until we've weathered the storms. Months passed after Claire's hospitalization, and the fragile threads that connected us all, Emily, her family, and me, began to weave themselves into something stronger, though still delicate. It wasn't easy. Healing never is. But slowly, painfully, we started to mend what had been broken. Claire moved into a sober living facility, determined to rebuild her life one day at a time. Emily visited her regularly, offering support without judgment, a level of compassion I hadn't expected from her. Meanwhile, our friendship deepened in ways neither of us could have predicted. We talked almost every day, sharing bits of our lives, the mundane and the meaningful, as if trying to make up for lost time. But even as things improved, there was an unspoken tension between us. A question neither of us dared to ask aloud: what were we to each other now? Friends? Allies? Something more? One evening, as I sat on my balcony nursing a beer, Emily called. Her voice sounded different, hesitant, almost nervous. "Hey," she said softly. "Are you busy?" "Nope," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "What's going on?" She paused, taking a shaky breath. "I need to tell you something." My stomach tightened. Those words always seem to precede bad news, or at least complicated news. "Okay," I said cautiously. "Go ahead." "I've been offered a job," she began, her tone measured. "Back in Portland." The beer bottle nearly slipped from my hand. "Wait, what? You're moving back?" "Yes," she admitted. "It's a great opportunity, a promotion, actually. And it's closer to Mom's house, which makes things easier for Dad. But I didn't want to just spring it on you. After everything we've been through, I wanted to be honest." I stared out at the horizon, processing her words. Emily moving back to Portland meant seeing her more often, not just over coffee or during visits, but potentially as part of my daily life. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. "When do you start?" I asked finally. "In a few weeks," she replied. "They're giving me some time to settle in." We fell silent for a moment, the weight of her decision hanging between us. Finally, I spoke. "Do you think that's a good idea?" I asked, my voice tinged with uncertainty. "Us being in the same city again? After everything?" She sighed, her frustration evident. "I don't know, Mark. Honestly, I don't. But running away hasn't fixed anything either. If we keep avoiding each other, we'll never figure out where we stand. Her honesty disarmed me. For years, I convinced myself that distance was the only way to heal, that staying apart was safer than risking another heartbreak. But maybe she was right. Maybe healing required facing the discomfort head-on instead of hiding from it. You're probably right, I admitted reluctantly. But this isn't going to be easy. I know, she said quietly. Nothing worth doing ever is. A week later, Emily arrived in Portland, and our dynamic shifted almost immediately. At first, we kept things light, catching up over lunch, grabbing coffee after work, but the undercurrent of unresolved feelings grew harder to ignore. One afternoon, as we walked along the riverfront park, she finally broached the subject neither of us had dared to address. "Mark," she began, stopping mid-step and turning to face me. "There's something I need to say. Something I should have said a long time ago." I braced myself, my heart pounding in my chest. "Okay. I love you," she blurted out, her cheeks flushing red. "Not like before, not the naive, idealistic way I loved you when we were married. This is different. Deeper. Messier. But it's real. And I can't keep pretending it doesn't exist." Her confession hit me like a tidal wave, knocking the air from my lungs. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All the emotions I'd buried, the longing, the guilt, the fear, came rushing to the surface. I don't know what to say," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "Emily, we've been through so much. How can we even begin to untangle all of it?" "We don't have to untangle it," she said firmly, stepping closer. "We just have to decide if we're willing to try, to take a chance on each other again, knowing it won't be perfect. Knowing it might hurt." Her words echoed in my mind, resonating with a truth I couldn't deny. Love isn't about perfection, it's about choosing to fight for someone despite their flaws, and your own. And standing there, looking into her eyes, I realized I wasn't ready to let her go, not yet. "Okay," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Let's try." Starting over wasn't easy. Old wounds reopened, trust wavered, and moments of doubt threatened to pull us apart. But we faced them together, refusing to let fear dictate our future. Slowly, painstakingly, we began to build something new, something stronger than what we'd lost. One evening, as we sat side by side on my balcony watching the sunset, Emily leaned her head against my shoulder. "Do you think we'll ever stop feeling like we're walking on eggshells?" she asked, her voice soft. "No," I replied honestly. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe the point isn't to erase the past, it's to carry it with us, to learn from it." She smiled, intertwining her fingers with mine. "You're smarter than you look." "Thanks," I teased, earning a playful nudge. "I think." As the sky faded from orange to purple, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't dared to feel in years, hope. Not the naive kind that assumes everything will work out perfectly, but the quiet, resilient kind that believes love is worth fighting for, even when it hurts. Because sometimes, the most beautiful things are born from the hardest places. Starting over wasn't a straight path, it was more like navigating a labyrinth, full of twists and turns that left us both exhilarated and exhausted. Some days, it felt like we were making progress, other days, it felt like we were taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But through it all, there was one constant, our determination to face the challenges together. Emily moved into a small apartment just a few blocks from mine, a decision that felt symbolic, as if she wanted to stay close but also maintain her independence. We spent weekends exploring Portland, rediscovering parts of ourselves and each other in quiet, unexpected ways. She introduced me to art galleries I'd never noticed before, and I took her hiking on trails I'd explored alone during my years of solitude. Each shared experience was a brick in the foundation of whatever this new us was becoming. But even as we built something new, the past lingered like a shadow, always threatening to creep back in. One evening, as we sat on her couch watching an old movie, Emily turned to me with a look of unease. "Do you ever think about Claire?" she asked softly. I paused, caught off guard by the question. "Not as much as I used to," I admitted. "Why?" She hesitated, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I saw her yesterday. She's doing well, better than I expected, actually. But, she mentioned something that stuck with me." "What did she say?" I asked cautiously. "She said she thinks we're making a mistake," Emily confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "That trying to rebuild something after everything that happened is only going to end in disaster." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Was she questioning us? Questioning herself? "And what do you think?" I asked finally, my tone careful. "I don't know," she admitted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Sometimes I wonder if she's right. If we're just setting ourselves up for heartbreak again." The vulnerability in her voice broke my heart. Reaching out, I took her hand in mine. Look at me, I said gently. We can't control the future, Em. No matter what happens, there are no guarantees. But I know this, running away won't fix anything. Avoiding each other didn't bring us peace, it just left us stuck in the same cycle of regret and guilt. At least now we're trying. Isn't that worth something? She nodded slowly, wiping her tears with the back of her free hand. Yeah. It is. Despite our resolve, doubts continued to surface, at inconvenient times, in unexpected places. One afternoon, while grabbing coffee at a local cafe, I ran into Ryan, Emily's oldest brother. He hadn't spoken to me since the day he and his siblings beat me up outside my house all those years ago. Seeing him now sent a jolt of unease through me, but he approached me with surprising hesitation. Hey, Mark, he said, his voice gruff but not hostile. Can we talk for a minute? Sure, I replied cautiously, gesturing to a nearby table. As we sat down, I braced myself for another confrontation. Instead, he surprised me. I owe you an apology, he began, his gaze fixed on the tabletop. For what we did to you. For believing Claire without giving you a chance to explain. None of us handled things the way we should have, and I'm sorry. His words caught me off guard. Over the years, I'd imagined countless scenarios where Emily's family apologized, or didn't, but hearing it now, face to face, was surreal. Thank you, I said simply, unsure of what else to say. It means a lot. He nodded, looking relieved. Emily told me you're working things out. That you're trying to move forward together. We are, I confirmed, meeting his eyes. It's not easy, but we're trying. He studied me for a moment, then offered a small, tentative smile. Good. She deserves happiness. And so do you. As he stood to leave, I felt a strange sense of closure, not just with Ryan, but with everything that had happened between their family and me. Maybe forgiveness really was possible, even after the worst betrayals. Months turned into a year, and Emily and I settled into a rhythm that felt equal parts familiar and new. We still argued, still stumbled over the lingering scars of our past, but we also laughed harder, loved deeper, and trusted more fully than either of us thought possible. One evening, as we walked along the riverfront, Emily stopped suddenly and turned to me, her expression serious. Mark, she said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. I want you to know something. Whatever happens next, for better or worse, I don't regret choosing to try again. You've shown me that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. Her words resonated deeply, echoing the lessons I'd learned over the past few years. Love wasn't about erasing the past or avoiding pain, it was about finding the courage to keep moving forward, together. I feel the same way, I said, pulling her into a tight embrace. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. As we stood there, the city lights reflecting on the water around us, I realized something important: healing isn't linear. Forgiveness isn't final. And love isn't static. They're all ongoing processes, delicate, messy, and beautiful in their imperfection. As the months stretched into another year, Emily and I found ourselves navigating a delicate dance, a push and pull between the past we couldn't escape and the future we were trying to build. We weren't the same people who had fallen in love all those years ago, nor were we the broken strangers who had reunited under painful circumstances. We were something new, something undefined, but also something real. And yet, despite the progress we'd made, there were moments when the cracks beneath us threatened to widen into chasms. One such moment came on a cold December evening, as snow began to dust the streets of Portland. We were sitting by the fireplace in her apartment, sipping hot chocolate and listening to the soft hum of holiday music playing in the background. It was cozy, almost idyllic, a rare moment of calm in what had been an emotionally turbulent few weeks. But then, out of nowhere, Emily spoke. Do you ever think about Claire? She asked quietly, staring into the flames. Her question caught me off guard, not because it was unexpected, we talked about Claire occasionally, but because of the weight behind it. Something in her tone told me this wasn't just idle curiosity. Sometimes, I admitted, setting my mug down. Why? She hesitated, wrapping her hands tightly around her own mug. She called me earlier today. She wants to see you. I froze, my stomach sinking. Seeing Claire again, after everything that had happened, felt like stepping back into a nightmare I'd worked so hard to leave behind. What did she say? I asked cautiously. She didn't say much, Emily replied, glancing at me nervously. Just that she needs to talk to you. That it's important. Important. The last time Claire had claimed something was important, it had ended with lies, betrayal, and my life being torn apart. I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger and fear. I don't owe her anything, I said firmly, standing up and pacing the room. After everything she put us through, why should I even consider meeting her? I'm not saying you owe her anything, Emily countered gently. But, maybe hearing her out could give you some closure. For yourself, not for her. Her words hit a nerve. Closure. Wasn't that what this entire journey had been about? Facing the pain head-on instead of running from it. And yet, the thought of sitting across from Claire again filled me with dread. I'll think about it, I muttered, avoiding her gaze. 2 days later, I found myself standing outside a small cafe downtown, staring at the entrance like it was the mouth of a cave hiding a monster. Inside, Claire waited, alone, according to Emily. Whatever she wanted to say it face to face. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door and stepped inside. She sat at a corner table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. When she saw me, her eyes widened in surprise, as if she hadn't expected me to show up. You came, she said softly, gesturing for me to sit. I did, I replied curtly, sliding into the seat across from her. What do you want, Claire? She flinched at my tone but didn't back down. I wanted to apologize, to explain. You already apologized, I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. In the hospital. Remember? Yes, but, she faltered, tears welling in her eyes. I need you to understand why I did what I did. Not to excuse it, to make sense of it. For both of us. For the next 20 minutes, she poured out her story, her struggles growing up in Emily's shadow, her desperate need for validation, the spiral of self-destruction that led her to lie about me. She admitted that part of her had hoped her actions would drive a wedge between Emily and me, not out of malice, but out of jealousy. She hated herself for it now, but she couldn't undo the damage. By the time she finished, we were both crying, her openly, me struggling to hold back tears I hadn't anticipated shedding. I don't forgive you, I said finally, my voice trembling. Not completely. Maybe not ever. But I believe you're sorry. And that's enough, for now. Meeting Claire didn't magically erase the pain she'd caused, but it did something unexpected, it freed me. Free from the lingering resentment I hadn't realized I was carrying. Free to focus on the present, and the future, without constantly looking over my shoulder. When I told Emily about the meeting, she hugged me tightly, relief washing over her features. Thank you for doing that, she whispered. For being brave enough to face her. It wasn't easy, I admitted, holding her close. But it was necessary. Our relationship continued to grow stronger, built on a foundation of honesty, vulnerability, and mutual respect. We celebrated small victories together, navigating tough conversations, supporting each other through setbacks, finding joy in the everyday moments. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, we began to trust again, not blindly, but with eyes wide open. One evening, as we stood on her balcony watching the city lights twinkle below, Emily turned to me with a soft smile. You know, she said, leaning her head against my shoulder, I used to think love was about finding someone perfect. Someone who completes you. But now I realize it's about finding someone willing to walk alongside you, even when the road is messy and uncertain. I smiled, kissing the top of her head. Sounds like you're describing us. Exactly, she murmured, intertwining her fingers with mine. Messy, imperfect, and worth every step. And as we stood there, bathed in the glow of the city, I allowed myself to believe it, that love isn't about perfection, it's about choosing to keep moving forward, together. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. Over the months that followed my meeting with Claire, I found myself revisiting memories I once thought would haunt me forever, not with bitterness, but with a quiet sense of acceptance. Life isn't about erasing pain, it's about learning to carry it without letting it define you. Emily and I had reached a place neither of us could have imagined when we first reconnected. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving, building something new out of the wreckage of our pasts. But as much as things had changed, some questions still lingered, unspoken yet ever present. Where were we headed? Could this fragile thing between us truly last? One crisp spring morning, Emily invited me to join her for a hike along one of the trails I'd shown her months earlier. It was a route we'd taken several times before, but today felt different, charged with an energy I couldn't quite name. As we climbed higher, the air grew cooler, and the world below seemed to shrink into insignificance. When we reached the summit, she stopped abruptly, turning to face me with an expression that made my heart skip a beat. Mark, she began, her voice trembling slightly, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. I raised an eyebrow, trying to mask my sudden nervousness. Okay, what is it? She hesitated, then reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. My breath caught in my throat as she opened it to reveal a simple silver ring. I know this might seem crazy, she said quickly, her cheeks flushing red. After everything we've been through, after all the mistakes we've made, but I can't imagine my life without you anymore. You've taught me what real love looks like, not perfect, not easy, but worth fighting for. So, will you marry me? Her words hung in the air, heavy and raw, echoing off the mountains around us. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The weight of her question, and the enormity of what it represented, was almost too much to process. Emily, I finally managed, my voice hoarse with emotion. Are you sure about this? About us? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. More sure than I've ever been about anything in my life. I stared at her, taking in every detail, the vulnerability in her eyes, the tremor in her hands, the hope radiating from her very being. This wasn't the same woman who had betrayed me years ago. She was stronger, wiser, more aware of her flaws, and more determined than ever to make things right. Yes, I whispered, pulling her into a tight embrace. Yes, I'll marry you. Planning our wedding wasn't easy, it never is, but it gave us a chance to reflect on how far we'd come. We decided to keep it small and intimate, inviting only those closest to us, Emily's parents, her brothers, who had since apologized profusely for their role in the past, and Claire, who attended quietly, humbly, grateful to be included. On the day of the ceremony, as I stood at the altar waiting for Emily to walk down the aisle, I couldn't help but think about the journey that had brought us here. From betrayal to forgiveness, from loss to redemption, we had faced it all, and somehow, we'd emerged stronger. When Emily appeared, dressed in a simple white gown, her smile lit up the room. As she joined me at the altar, I took her hand in mine, feeling the warmth of her touch, a reminder of everything we'd fought for. Our vows were short but heartfelt, filled with promises not of perfection, but of effort. Of showing up, even on the hard days. Of choosing each other, again and again, no matter what challenges lay ahead. After the ceremony, as we danced under the stars at the reception, Emily rested her head against my shoulder, her voice soft in my ear. Do you think we're ready for this? She asked, half joking but clearly seeking reassurance. No, I admitted with a chuckle. But I don't think anyone ever really is. That's the point, isn't it? Love isn't about having all the answers, it's about being willing to figure them out together. She smiled, squeezing my hand. You always know exactly what to say. Later that night, as we sat alone by the fire pit, watching the embers glow softly in the darkness, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't dared to feel in years, peace. Not the kind that comes from avoiding pain or pretending everything is okay, but the kind that comes from knowing you faced your demons, and chosen to move forward anyway.